Hello, hi, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion. My notes, husband is bringing me some water. I will be nice and prepared for this conversation because it's going to be a good one, and probably around about an hour or so, depending on how caught up I get in the topics, in each topic. Alrighty, well, in this discussion, I'm going to be sharing my personal experiences with breastfeeding. I'm a mom of 2 kids, stumbling all over my words already. I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 6.5-year-old. So they're 19 months apart. And I, as a new pregnant woman back in 2016, or rather, 2015. I was pregnant in 2015 and I gave birth in 2016, just for some time there. As I was the first out of my group of friends to be pregnant, and I had already successfully come off of a slew of pharmaceutical pills for mental health issues such as depressive episodes and chronic anxiety, panic disorder, insomnia, PTSD. I came off of a large amount of pharmaceuticals with the help of plant medicine, specifically cannabis, and it was just from smoking. It was just from smoking. It was really just that easy for me and helpful and effective. And then I got pregnant. And I got married and I got pregnant. And when I got pregnant, I had prenatal depression and prenatal anxiety, which, looking back, I can honestly say was definitely circumstantial. My dad was really ill at the time. I had been under a lot of pressure to conceive from family, specifically my mom, and had just had this big grand wedding, and there was all of these things that were circulating in my life at the time. So the environment and circumstances around me really impacted my experience with pregnancy. I also had symphysis pubis dysfunction, which is SPD. The acronym is SPD. It's something you can go on and Google, but it was very painful for me, and I couldn't move in bed. I couldn't turn from side to side, couldn't walk and sit comfortably without pain. So naturally, my pregnancy wasn't at all high risk, but it was just being monitored a little differently because of the prenatal depression and anxiety and because of the SPD. And so I was told to go back up on Effexor, which is what I had weaned off of. Seroquel completely weaned off in Effexor. I was on the lowest dose when I got pregnant. And when I was diagnosed with prenatal depression, I was told that the reason I was suffering from prenatal depression was because I came off of pharmaceuticals. That's what I was told. So I was encouraged to go back up on my Effexor, and I was also encouraged to take morphine from my obstetrician, my OB, and these things also really impacted my pregnancy. So that's pregnancy number 1. Gave birth. Won't go into the whole story of the delivery. It was nothing that I had dreamt of. It did not go as planned or thought of. When I got pregnant, I really wanted to breastfeed. I was breast is best, and this is what I want to do. And I had no bottles in my house. I didn't have any formula in my house. I really just believed that my body would produce what my child needed. And I believed that breast milk was in fact best for my child. And I really didn't inform myself at all about any other method of feeding. I did not look into formula. I really did not educate myself at all. And I also did not educate myself at all on breastfeeding, if I'm being really honest. I didn't take any pregnancy courses. I didn't join any breastfeeding groups. I was not going out of my way to further inform and educate myself, because at the time of my pregnancy, I really believed that, my body is meant to do this and it will just flow naturally. And this is just a very human experience. And I really did not go out of my way to become more informed about anything. And that ended up being really interesting for me, because when I gave birth, after hours of being in labor and being induced and having an epidural, so all the pharmaceuticals that one can have during birth, I was leaving the hospital within, I think it was like 48 hours of being discharged from birth, and my son was wearing my son was wearing a white, like fuzzy snowsuit type of thing to take him home. It was January, so it's really cold in Canada in January, which is where I currently am and where my son was born. And as I got into the back seat with my son as a new mom, and my husband was sitting next to me and my mother-in-law was driving, I looked at my baby in his car seat and he looked yellow. He straight up looked yellow. And I made a comment to my family, to my husband and to my mother-in-law, and I was like, Avery looks yellow. And they were like, what do you mean? He's fine. Like, it's the lighting. He's fine. You just left the hospital. If he had jaundice, they wouldn't let you leave. They would have noticed. So went home with Avery, and because I was also induced, my milk was not there. I had colostrum, and there was really no milk in my breasts yet. And my baby would not stop screaming. He was shrieking and crying and just super upset. And I'm a brand new mom, just took my baby home from the hospital. He's looking yellow. He won't stop screaming. I remember calling my sister-in-law and telling her, what's going on. And she said, it's very possible he's just hungry. And she kind of explained to me how to massage the breast and how to see what was coming out and what was going, and there was really just no milk there. There was nothing happening. So even though he would latch, and even though there was the colostrum, which is really important and, vital in the first few moments and days of breastfeeding, there just wasn't enough to sustain him, and he was crying out of hunger. So I panicked and I ran to the kitchen, and I remembered that magically Similac appeared in the mail during my pregnancy. Never signed up for it, never went on any sites. I think I forget how it happens, but anyways, here in Canada, it just, you get little things in the mail when you're pregnant. And so Similac was sitting in the pantry, and I didn't think twice about it. My kid was hungry, I was a new mom, and I was scared. So I took out the formula and I fed my kid. He drank from the bottle and he stopped crying and he fell asleep. So that was my very first feeding experience with my son. Prior to that first feeding experience, just to give you some backstory about the pressure that came also with formula feeding and breastfeeding for me. My mom is of a very different generation, very different mindset, and really, tried to do her best to convince me that formula feeding was the way to go, because when you breastfeed, you ruin your breasts. They become pruny and saggy and really unattractive, and the best way to avoid that would be to formula feed. Just like my sister told me I should request a C-section because I'll ruin my vagina if I have vaginal delivery. So you can't always listen to the folks around you, okay? You have to think for yourself, which in this case I did. And I really was very, gung-ho on, I don't know if that's politically correct to say anymore. I'm not even sure why I said that. Anyways, someone please let me know in the comments if that's an appropriate saying anymore. Who knows nowadays? But I really didn't know any different. And like I said, I was super breast is best and really wanted to breastfeed, and I had goals. And I remember thinking I'm going to pump and I'm going to have a stash of breast milk and I'm just going to like kill it and it's going to be great and it's going to be successful. But that wasn't my story. And I live in Quebec. And here in Quebec, they send, once you are discharged from the hospital after giving birth, they send the CLSC over to your house, which is, I suppose you can say it's like a government-run community center with services. So they have like mental health services and parent services and things like that. So I had a lactation consultant. They sent a lactation consultant over to the house, and I was telling her that I had no milk production and my baby was really hungry, and they were very pushy about breastfeeding. They really did not encourage formula feeding, which at the time really felt biased to me and felt damaging, because at the time I was really struggling with breastfeeding, and I was like, how could you be pressuring me to make this work when it's not working for me? And it was really painful, and my son ended up having jaundice, and I had to force feed him like every hour. So the first few days of being a new mom were traumatic, heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, heart-aching, and hard, and really just not blissful and happy and like enjoying my new baby with my beautiful husband. It was really damn hard. I had nurses coming in and out of my house for the first like 4 days. We also had the rabbi, because I grew up Jewish, although I no longer identify with being Jewish and don't practice and believe in religion, period. At the time, I was really different, 6.5 years ago, and had different beliefs and morals and values. And the rabbi was coming in and checking the baby out and getting him ready for his bris. And he also noticed that the baby was jaundiced, so we had to postpone the bris. And so I had a lot of people coming in and out of my home, and my baby was being force-fed, and my milk wasn't coming in. And the lactation consultant, who did come to my house to supposedly help me, told me to put cabbage leaves on my breasts to increase milk supply. I don't know if there's any breastfeeding mamas watching, but it might be common knowledge. I'm not sure. It wasn't common knowledge for me. Cabbage decreases your breast milk. It basically stops the flow. So it went from bad to worse, and postpartum depression kicked in. That was fun. So I had a lot of pressure put on me by female family members to not breastfeed, which obviously, can I blame my mom for thinking and feeling the way that she did? No. Should I stay angry and resentful and hold that guilt and shame and anger in my body towards her for her beliefs? No, doesn't serve me, right? Our grandmothers, our mothers, like all the women that came before us, they all thought very differently, and they did things differently, and society was different. So it was really just what my family members really truly thought was best. My husband was very supportive. Breastfeed if you want, formula feed if you want, as long as you're happy and healthy and the baby's happy and healthy and everyone's thriving, like fed is really what's best, right? So I basically gave up on breastfeeding, and I felt like I had like my dreams crushed, because like I said, I really did not inform myself over formula at all. And we went through a variety of different formulas, because shortly after all of the jaundice and all the other issues, on top of my child being injected with medical intervention as a newborn, there was just one problem after the other. His skin was very, very red and blotchy. It looked very abnormal. His poo was very inconsistent, and he was quite constipated. And this is like infancy, right? This is like the first year of his life. and he started getting really bad eczema and baby acne all over his face, and his skin was rough and bumpy, and he was chunky, and he was the cutest baby, but there were all of these little things that kept coming up, and it was just so frustrating. And for a very long time, I just believed that this was normal. I believed that my son's symptoms were common and normal because that's what the doctors told me. There really wasn't a lot of information for me at the time, whether I went to go seek it or not. What's the difference? I wasn't informed, right? And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. I took people's words at face value. I listened when, my mom and my grandmother and the doctors told me that eczema is super common and a lot of babies have it. But then I'm like, well, where does it come from? What causes eczema? Like, that doesn't make sense that a brand new baby, a brand new human being would be born into this world and just have so many issues straight off the bat. Like, it didn't make sense to me. It really started the questioning started to come up for me. Why? Why is my child having this issue? Where does this issue really stem from? And I bought the idea and belief that it was common and normal and I had it. Nobody ever told me that it could have been an injection injury. Nobody ever told me that it could have been from formula. Injections and formula feeding, super normal, super common, it's just what parents use and do. And because the FDA or because Health Canada or because the pharmacy sells it, because people say it's okay, we do it. We follow suit because I certainly didn't believe that my doctors would ever steer me in the wrong direction. I certainly never for a moment ever thought that my doctors would ever allow a mom or a human to do something that is not safe or effective or like any of those things. I truly believed that the system had my back. I believed wholeheartedly that my doctors would never do anything to harm me. And maybe it's very possible that they are just fucking out to lunch and that they don't realize that a lot of the things that they give moms, epidurals and Pitocin and medical injections and all of these other medical interventions and all of these things that a woman goes through in such a short span of time. And to a new baby, to the fetus, these things are going to affect the fetus. And we're lying to ourselves if we think that these things don't affect our children. Formula, if I had known then what I know now, I never would have done a couple of things. I just would not have. I would have chosen different options. But I didn't because I didn't know any better. And I'm glad that I experienced this because it gives me the opportunity to share my story and to help moms navigate the unknown, the fear in being caught up in societal pressure, what your parents tell you to do, what, lactation consultants tell you to do, what the Facebook mom groups tell you to do. We have to have these conversations, ladies. We have to. It's so important to talk about your experiences and not just in closed spaces, in public spaces. I know how hard it can be to share your life on social media. Trust. But if I hadn't gone through the trauma that I went through, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I'm beyond grateful for who I am today. I am beyond blessed and grateful that I have experienced all that I have because it has taught me to become better informed, to ask more questions, to have that fuck yes energy, to go with what feels in alignment with me and my soul, to follow my values and morals, to set healthy boundaries, but more importantly, to ask questions. So that's a little bit about my experience with breastfeeding. It was a nightmare the first time around. Really, really, really tough. I did also consume cannabis during my first pregnancy, much more reluctantly than in my second. I started using it for the depression and the pain, but it was joints that were like this big. You can only really pull 4 times from it and then it would be finished. And it was because I was scared and I didn't have enough information and I didn't know, was I going to give my child autism? Was he going to develop differently? Was he going to be underdeveloped? Like, what was going to happen to my child because I am using a Schedule I drug, right? That causes birth defects, right? That's what we're taught about cannabis. That's what we're taught. But yet, every time I consumed, I felt so much better. I felt so much better. The nausea went away. The pain wasn't as heightened. I slept through the night on the nights that I consumed. So smoking and breastfeeding, for the duration of time, I tried for about 4 months to breastfeed. It was bottle breast, because I was doing everything that I could to really try. And I was pumping and I was doing all the things. And there was so much shame. So much shame in that time. I can't believe my body, this is what I would tell myself, I can't believe my body isn't doing what it's meant to do. What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Right? That poor me, that victim mentality, that burden of carrying the guilt and the shame because, well, they say that you can do it. You're a woman, you can breastfeed, you could give birth, you could do those things. That's what you're built for, right? So what happens to the moms that can't breastfeed? What happens to the moms that fucking hate breastfeeding? What happens to them? What choice do they have? Now it's been formula or breastfeeding, but formula can be very, very dangerous. And it can cause other problems like digestive issues. I have a whole list here. Respiratory tract illnesses, food allergies, congestion, allergies to food, I think I said, digestive issues. Apparently it causes SIDS too. Who knew? Here I was thinking, healthy babies just die. But anyway, sorry. I don't mean to minimize SIDS. I just have beliefs about what causes SIDS. And it's not very surprising that when you research the dangers of formula, that comes up. It's really not that shocking. This is a man-made product, right? Pharmacies sell formula. Walmart sells formula. Like, watch the money train. Look at the ingredients. I have a rule. We buy maybe 5% of our food that's in our house. I can't pronounce some of the ingredients on. Maybe 5%. But that's, that comes with time and experience and being let down and knowing that just because something's sold in a store and just because they tell you it's safe doesn't mean it is. It just doesn't. So in the end, cannabis really did not negatively affect my son. He was developing beautifully and he had hit every single milestone and then some. He was babbling at like 4 months old. It was wild. He's spectacular, my child. He is spectacular. So with the lack of community, with the lack of education surrounding maternal mental health, lack of education and resources surrounding the 4th trimester, battling postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and a new one, postpartum rage, I decided to get pregnant again. I had told myself, well, I don't want to get my body back just to lose it again. And if I wait too long to have another child, I might scare myself off from doing it because this one was so bad, so painful and traumatic. I might never want to do it again. So let's just have our daughter. Let's just have Ruby. That's just the conversation. And lo and behold, we had a Ruby. But it takes 2 years for the female body to heal from a pregnancy. Now, is that a full-term pregnancy? I can't tell you. I know that I believe so. I don't know what happens if you've miscarried or had an abortion. I'm not aware of that. But from a full-term pregnancy, it takes 2 years for the body to heal. So my children are 19 months apart. At Avery's first birthday, I was already about 8 weeks or so pregnant with Ruby. And this time I consumed cannabis as needed, as wanted, because I was watching my son grow and I was watching him thrive. So I had no more fears about what that plant would do to my child in utero. And with Ruby being born, I said to myself, again, never really educated myself about formula at this point. You know, I've only really become more aware of how toxic formula is in the last couple years. And she just turned 5. So I didn't want to pressure myself the same way again. I didn't want to say I will only feed my child this way. And so I told myself when she was born that I would do both. I would breastfeed and I would formula feed, because I did believe in co-sleeping and I did a lot of skin to skin as possible. But when Ruby was born, it was like I had no time for baby blues. She was born, I think I was happy for like a day, and then I got smacked real hard with severe postpartum depression, very different from the first time around. I had homicidal ideations. I had suicidal ideations as well. And when I was honest with the nurse practitioner about what I was going through at my daughter's checkup, instead of consoling me, offering me resources, or really just fucking giving me a hug and being a real human, they turned around and they called Child Protective Services on me. So that was real fun to deal with when Ruby was a newborn and going through severe postpartum depression. And breastfeeding really wasn't as dreadful the second time around, but I didn't want to commit to it. I was so sick with depression and felt no connection towards my daughter, felt very detached, and really just had no interest in her. Didn't really want to hold her, didn't want to cuckoo her. It was very, very distant. And every time I was with her, I kind of felt like I was forcing myself because she needed it. And so I didn't really push myself to breastfeed. It was like more out of convenience if we were, you know, in bed and about to nap or something and she was a little fussy, then I would give her boob. But there was really no commitment and no real effort put in for breastfeeding my child, because I had all of these blocks and all of the trauma from the first experience with Avery, not all that long ago. So it really didn't feel like something I wanted to do. And the reason that I'm sharing my story now, so many years later, is because I've shared a lot about postpartum depression. I've shared a lot about cannabis and pregnancy. And, you know, with Breastfeeding Week being last week, I found that it was a good opportunity to come and share my story now, because I have such a different view on it. I see my experiences so differently. Of course, they still hurt a little bit, but the resonance field has lessened so much on that. I can have these conversations without crying. I feel a lot less guilt and shame about the choices that I made. I used to really regret some of the choices that I made, like medical intervention with injections at birth. I, for a while, hated myself, lived with a lot of, regret and a lot of shame, thinking that I did something to injure my children. And I really took that on as part of my identity of like, how could I, do this to my children? I injured my children because I trusted the doctors. I trusted the government. I trusted. But these are my babies, and this is their future. And I think that for a long time, anyways, for me, giving things to my kids in the beginning with like food and TV and antibiotics, and I mean, obviously antibiotics are very important, but there are natural antibiotics, okay? Like there are, and they work really fucking well, like colloidal silver. But just all the things that I did really came from just not knowing any different. And I also really didn't think to myself, how is this going to affect my children long term, right? It was, what can I feed them now they're hungry? What's popular? What's tasty? What's quick and easy? What's convenient? As healthy, fed kids are happy kids, right? Fed kids are happy kids. So I wasn't looking at ingredients, and I wasn't, going out of my way to really think long term until recently. I think about every single thing that goes onto my kids' skin and into their body. And I think, what is this going to do to them as a teenager? What is this going to do to them as an adult? Is this going to increase their chances of depression, obesity, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's? Right? Like Red 40 and other chemicals that are in food, like Skittles. How many of you have fed your kids Skittles in the past? Have given your kids Skittles when, there's titanium oxide in there, which is fucking deadly to humans. I've eaten Skittles. So I think about these things, and I don't go based off of, well, I grew up with it and I'm fine, because I'm not fine. I have not been fine. My whole life, I have had issue after issue after issue. So why do we go with that mentality? Why do we tell ourselves, well, my parents did it, or my parents gave it to me and I'm fine? That's not true. We're not fine. We're the epitome of not fine, my friends. And food has gotten worse over the last few years. The amount of chemicals in food, and we have to think, what is this going to do to our children long term? When we inject them with preventative medications, how is this going to affect my child long term? Is it going to affect their fertility? Is it going to affect their heart? Is it going to affect their brain? I want proof. I want studies. I don't want clinical trials based off of maybe, okay, this one's black labeled, this one's approved, this is FDA, this is that. I want generations of research. One generation is not enough time to really dictate that a medication or food is safe for human consumption. It's just not long enough. You have not seen that entire lifespan and then procreate and what their genetics deliver. So when people tell me, well, believe in science and science doesn't lie and science, I'm sorry, but I can only trust science to a certain degree. Because if something has just been studied for a couple of years, that does not guarantee me anything. We don't know what the side effects are going to be long term. We don't know how the genetics are changing based off of what we're providing. And formula is one of those things we don't know. We're told that it's safe. We're told that it's okay. It just, that's right. It hasn't been around long enough. It just hasn't been. It just has not been. Same thing with formula, Enfamil, Similac, all of these things, and the ingredients, and all the things that we're giving. Like, this is what moms really do need to start thinking about and considering. Like, unsolicited advice. Y'all should, we need to think about these things. These are our kids. I want my kids to grow old. I want my kids to procreate. I want them to be part of the future of Earth. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be thriving. I want them to be disease-free. That's my job. That's my fucking responsibility as a parent. And the only time that my thinking changed, or not the only time, the first time my thinking changed was when I got pregnant. I stopped using perfume. I started to use more natural products. I started watching what I was eating, but then prenatal depression came in, so that went completely out the window. But that's when it occurred to me, what am I putting into my body? How is this going to affect my child? So why don't we carry that same mentality throughout motherhood? Why does it stop once baby's born? Very interesting. Okay. All right. I've given enough food for thought, I think, for tonight's conversation. Expressed by Ashley says, "Hi, lovely, miss you." I'm always loving that we connect in this area, forward thinking. I just read about Skittles, right? Wild. Wild. Magical Peach says, "I agree with this. I have some regrets too. Hugs." So, Magical Peach, if you're still listening, let me offer you the best kind of advice that I can give anybody in a situation like ours. Let go of that regret. Let it go. It does not serve you. Look at it as though you did it for a reason and it was to learn so that you can grow and heal from it and you can make different decisions moving forward. Right? Regret does not serve our body, and when we hold on to regret, that causes us physical pain and discomfort. That causes shame too. If you need any help letting go of some of that regret energetically, I'd be more than happy to help you with that. But so this is what I wanted to share tonight. There are lots of studies online that you can find about the dangers of formula. And you can also, if you're about to become pregnant, thinking about becoming pregnant, or are newly pregnant, Mother's Mary offers a really phenomenal 4-series masterclass event called Maternal Mental Health. It's the Maternal Mental Health Masterclass, and it is fully loaded with really, really good information for expecting moms or brand new moms, and quite honestly, even seasoned moms, because we think that we know things until we know them. So, if you've struggled with postpartum depression and maybe you've never really quite felt right since becoming a mom, that can be, a reason. It can be unhealed postpartum depression, or, it could be issues from when you gave birth. And no mom deserves to live her entire life without healing, without support, without resources, without community. These things are so incredibly important. And as much as I appreciate and I'm grateful for social media, there's nothing more important in the world than actual communication between humans and community. We're so taken away from human connection, especially since the pandemic, where we're told don't touch people, don't go see people, be isolated, 2 feet back, this, that, whatever, cover your face, all these things really takes away from the human experience and what humans need the most, which is connection. And when you're a new mom, when you're a mom, connection to people who think like you or feel like you or who have experienced things similar to you is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. All right. I don't mind answering any questions if there are any. I'm not sure if there's any questions that anyone's thinking. But I can definitely, go and talk a lot more about things that I don't agree with and things that I've woken up to and things that I just wish I had done differently, but realize now why I did them, and the magic of healing and acceptance and self-forgiveness and radical self-love and accountability, all things that are just so important to me, because that's what saved my life from severe postpartum depression, because I almost died from it. And it really had the potential to ruin my life. So I believe in the work that Mother's Mary does. I believe in all kinds of healing. And if that is something that you need, if you're looking for support, resources, community, and healing, if you're using plant medicine and you want to elevate, level up your use to having it help actually heal you and not just using it because it's better than pills or because it feels good in the moment, mothersmary.com is where you got to go to find information like that. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I truly hope that the information shared tonight helps someone somewhere, somehow.